A book you can see but cannot read is a ghost of history. For centuries, brilliant minds have stared at pages filled with symbols that refuse to give up their meaning, their stories sealed away by time. These are the world's undeciphered texts, 15 profound mysteries that guard entire chapters of the human experience. By the end of our journey, you will understand not just what these artifacts are, but why their silence is one of history's most compelling challenges. We will uncover a medieval manuscript with impossible botanical illustrations and a treasure map coded in numbers that may lead to nothing at all. What do you think drives us to solve a puzzle that has no answer? That silence is not an absence of sound, but an absence of meaning, a void where understanding should be. To decipher is to rebuild a bridge that has crumbled into the sea. It is not simply swapping one word for another. It is the painstaking reassembly of a lost world's thoughts, its fears, its daily beliefs. Without that key, we are left with artifacts that are hauntingly incomplete. Consider the immense effort behind their creation. A medieval scribe might spend years illuminating a single volume, driven by faith. A forgotten empire's clerk would meticulously record harvests and tributes, ensuring order. These were not idle doodles, they were vital. They held power, memory, and identity. Yet today, we hold their physical form while their essence remains just out of reach, separated by a barrier more final than any locked door. The tools of modern codebreakers and linguists are formidable, but they rely on patterns, on repetition, on some point of common reference. The legendary Rosetta Stone worked because it said the same thing 3 different ways. Without such a key, a text becomes an island with no map to the mainland. It exists in profound isolation. This is the poignant context for the artifacts we explore, beautiful monuments to human expression that speak in a language we have forgotten how to hear. Our journey into this silence begins with perhaps the most famous of all these isolated islands, a book that defies categorization and has sparked centuries of speculation. The Voynich manuscript is a paradox bound in vellum. Its pages are a riot of color and life, depicting flora that seems to sprout from a dream, intricate astrological diagrams, and serene scenes of women bathing in interconnected pools of green liquid. The script that winds around these images is elegant, flowing, and completely indecipherable. It uses an alphabet of around 30 unique characters, arranged in words and sentences that follow distinct patterns, suggesting a real language with its own rules of grammar. This is not random scribbling. The consistency is what torments researchers. For over a century, the world's sharpest cryptographic minds, including teams who cracked wartime codes, have thrown their best methods at it. They have analyzed letter frequency, word roots, and syntactic structure. In recent years, even artificial intelligence has been tasked with finding a pattern, a key, any point of entry. Every attempt has ended in frustration. The book resists, maintaining its silence with a stubborn elegance. This leads to the great divide in theories about its origin. One camp believes it is a sophisticated cipher created to protect precious, perhaps heretical, knowledge about botany or astronomy. The other argues it is a masterful work of nonsense, crafted by a clever forger or perhaps someone experiencing a unique state of mind, a private language given beautiful form. The manuscript does not answer. It simply exists, a century-old question mark written in a hand no one living can understand. From this garden of unearthly plants and enigmatic prose, our search turns toward a text that claims a source not of this world, a script said to be delivered by divine messengers. Bound in worn leather and filled with nearly 450 pages of dense, cryptic script, the Rohonc Codex feels like a storybook from a world that never was. Its pages are a chaotic gallery of human experience, vividly illustrated with scenes of pitched battles, solemn religious rites, and moments of everyday life, all surrounded by columns of beautiful, baffling symbols. This is not an abstract list or a dry ledger. It presents itself as a complete narrative, a saga waiting to be told, yet its language is a locked door. The script itself is astonishingly complex, utilizing around 150 distinct characters. Some look faintly like runes, others recall ancient alphabets, but together they form a system entirely their own. Unlike the Voynich manuscript, whose origin is traced to medieval Europe, the Codex's own history is a shadow. It seemingly appeared in the Hungarian town of Rohonc in the early 1800s, with no clear record of where it came from or who created it. This murky provenance has opened a floodgate of theories. Some researchers have passionately argued it records a lost ancient Hungarian history. Others see it as a relic of the Dacian people, or a secret testament of early Christian groups whose beliefs diverged from the mainstream. The wild variety of these proposals highlights a fundamental problem. Without a key, any translation is more a reflection of the translator's hopes than the text's true meaning. What makes the Codex so profoundly tantalizing is the dissonance between its images and its impenetrable words. The illustrations show a clear mix of influences: Christian crosses alongside what appear to be pagan sun symbols, soldiers in medieval armor, and scenes of both celestial and earthly conflict. This visual language suggests a culture of surprising synthesis, a community that wove together different traditions into a unique tapestry of belief and identity. That story is visually present but verbally silent. Modern analysis confirms the book's physical materials are authentically old, placing its creation likely between the 15 and 1700s. This rules out it being a simple modern hoax. Someone or some group went to extraordinary lengths to produce this volume. They had a story they desperately needed to preserve, a cosmology they needed to illustrate, a record they believed was vital. Their intent hums in the silence between the symbols. The Rohonc Codex is more than a puzzle. It is a potential chronicle of a forgotten way of seeing the world, a narrative of faith and conflict etched in a private language. Its very existence suggests whole chapters of European cultural history may be missing, remembered only in symbols we can see but cannot comprehend. From this heavy, leather-bound mystery of the not-too-distant past, we journey much further back to a text not written on fragile parchment but forged into enduring metal. The silent symbols of the Rohonc Codex are a whisper from centuries past, but the Phaistos disc is a shout across millennia. Unearthed from the ruins of a Minoan palace on the island of Crete in 1908, this object is disarmingly simple in form. It is a disc of fired clay, roughly the size of a small dinner plate, yet its surface holds a seismic mystery. Pressed into the clay on both sides, spiraling inward like the coil of a serpent, are 241 individual symbols. They are not drawn or carved. Each one was stamped into the soft clay with a pre-formed seal, a technique that makes this disc one of the earliest known uses of movable type in human history, predating Gutenberg's printing press by over 3,000 years. These 45 distinct pictographic signs are miniature works of art. A careful observer can make out the profile of a human head crowned with a feathered headdress, a walking man, a bird in flight, a lily, a ship, a shield, and various tools. They are arranged in clear groups separated by incised lines, suggesting words or phrases in a structured message. This is not random decoration. The intentionality is breathtaking. Someone in the second millennium before the Common Era possessed a set of 45 unique seals, carefully arranged them in a specific order on this disc, and pressed them with purpose to create a permanent record. And that is where the certainty ends. The disk is profoundly, frustratingly alone. No other artifact like it has ever been found in Crete or anywhere else in the world. The script it uses does not match the other known Minoan writing systems, Linear A and Linear B. It is a language isolate in the truest sense, a single sentence from a lost conversation. Scholars have proposed countless theories. Is it a hymn to a goddess, a legal document recording the palace's stores, a narrative of a royal journey, or a military campaign? The method of its creation, using standardized seals, strongly points to an administrative or ceremonial function for a sophisticated Bronze Age bureaucracy. But without a second example, a parallel text or a Rosetta Stone for the Minoans, every translation attempt is built on guesswork. The Phaistos disc is a complete, elegant, and utterly self-contained statement from a brilliant civilization. We can see the handwriting, but we cannot read the note. It is a solitary voice from the dawn of complexity, speaking with perfect clarity in a tongue the modern world has never learned. From this ancient, impersonal clay tablet stamped by an official hand, our search turns to a text that is hauntingly intimate, etched not for an empire, but for one individual, on a material far more enduring than fired earth. Sometimes a text survives not because it was cherished, but because it was repurposed in the most unexpected way. In the quiet halls of the Archaeological Museum in Zagreb, Croatia, rests an artifact that embodies this strange fate. It is the Liber Linteus Zagrebensis, the Linen Book of Zagreb, and it holds the distinction of being the longest known Etruscan text in existence. Yet we can read it only because of a macabre historical detour. This sacred text was not found in an Italian temple or a noble's tomb. It was discovered carefully cut into long strips and used as the wrappings for an Egyptian mummy. A religious ritual calendar, painstakingly inscribed on linen around 250 years before the Common Era in ancient Etruria, ended its journey as mere packing material for the final resting place of an individual far from its homeland. The linen itself tells a silent story of trade, travel, and perhaps a Roman soldier's souvenir that later found a practical, if irreverent, use. This bizarre preservation method saved the book from the decay that would have claimed parchment or papyrus, gifting modern scholars with over 1,200 words of a language that remains one of Europe's great linguistic puzzles. Etruscan civilization was the sophisticated precursor to Rome, deeply influencing Roman art, architecture, and religious practice, but their language stands apart. It is not an Indo-European language like Latin or Greek, but a linguistic isolate, a unique branch with no clear living relatives. We have learned to sound out its alphabet, which was adapted from the Greeks, and we can understand the basic meaning of some words from short bilingual inscriptions, often just names or dedications. But the Liber Linteus, with its long, complex sentences, operates on a different level. It is a complete document, a detailed liturgical manual outlining ceremonies, sacrifices, and invocations to gods whose names we recognize but whose full natures we can only glimpse. The text is a tantalizing window into the spiritual rhythm of an entire year for a mysterious people. We can identify words for months, for offerings, for deities like Uni, who parallels the Roman Juno. We see the structure of their rituals, the careful order of their appeals to the divine. Yet the heart of the message, the specific prayers, the myths being referenced, the exact reasons for each ceremony, all of this remains locked behind a grammatical and lexical wall we have only partially scaled. The book is a detailed map to a landscape we cannot fully enter. Its survival is a profound historical accident, a twist of fate that saved a voice Rome itself eventually subdued. The Etruscans left behind stunning tombs, vivid art, and a legacy absorbed by their conquerors, but their own literature and histories have vanished. The Liber Linteus is the closest we come to hearing their own voice in an extended narrative, discussing their own relationship with the gods. It connects two ancient worlds in a single, fragile object, the spiritual life of pre-Roman Italy and the funerary practices of Ptolemaic Egypt. This linen text reminds us that understanding is often fragmented, pieced together from remnants that survived by chance, not by design. From this Mediterranean story of cultural intersection preserved through a funerary practice, our gaze shifts to a text born in utter isolation on the most remote inhabited island on Earth. The fragility of a text preserved by chance stands in stark contrast to one born from profound isolation. On Easter Island, known to its people as Rapa Nui, the colossal stone moai statues gaze eternally inland, their backs to the sea. But another, far more delicate mystery lies in the island's museum cases, wooden tablets, staffs, and ornaments carved with the elegant, enigmatic glyphs of Rongorongo. This is not merely decoration. The symbols are intricate and standardized, featuring frigate birds with curved beaks, crouching human figures, fantastical sea creatures, and geometric patterns, all arranged in tightly packed lines. The carving technique itself is a puzzle. The script is written in what scholars call reverse boustrophedon. This means the carver would start at the bottom left corner of a tablet, carve a line of glyphs from left to right, then physically rotate the tablet 180 degrees to read and carve the next line. It is as if the writing itself mimics the turning of the earth, a complex, deliberate act for a deeply important message. The tragedy of Rongorongo is not just that we cannot read it, but that we know the moment its voice was silenced. When European missionaries arrived in the 1860s, they were shown these tablets by Rapa Nui elders, but the cultural disruptions of that era, including severe population decline from introduced illnesses, had already severed the chain of knowledge. The last individuals who understood the script, possibly high-ranking priests or chiefs, had passed without teaching a new generation. The missionaries, viewing the glyphs as pagan idolatry, encouraged their destruction. Only a handful of authentic objects survived, a tiny corpus from which to rebuild an entire intellectual tradition. What was lost? The most compelling theories suggest Rongorongo was not an everyday script, but a sacred one. Some researchers, noting similarities between the glyph sequences and the island's extensive oral chants, believe the tablets may have recorded creation myths, genealogies of chiefs tracing back to the original settlers, or complex astronomical calendars crucial for navigation and ritual. Each tablet could have been a chapter in the island's sacred history, a wooden library holding the identity of a people who crossed the vast Pacific. The central, agonizing question is what language the glyphs encode. Was it an archaic form of the Rapa Nui language now changed, or was it a special ceremonial language used only for these sacred texts, much like Latin in the Catholic Church? Without a parallel text, a Rosetta Stone of the Pacific, the 26 surviving artifacts are a closed book. Rongorongo is thus a double monument, a testament to the sophisticated, independent development of writing in one of the world's most remote cultures, and a poignant memorial to the fragility of knowledge itself. It represents a complete system of thought that flourished in isolation for centuries, only to be extinguished in a historical blink, leaving behind beautiful, silent glyphs as its only echo. This idea of a silent guide, a set of instructions that cannot be fully understood, leads us from the wooden tablets of the Pacific to a very different kind of text, one carved not in wood, but into the very landscape of the American Southwest. A map can be a text of its own, telling a story through coastlines and captions. In the hushed reading rooms of Yale University's Voynich Library, one such document ignited a firestorm that still smolders today. It is known as the Vinland Map, a simple parchment sketch of the world as Europeans understood it in the 15th century, with one extraordinary addition. In the distant northwest Atlantic, across a stretch of ocean, The map depicts a large, rugged island labeled in Latin as Vinlandia Insula. Accompanying annotations describe it as a land of vines discovered by Bjarne and Leif Erikson. If authentic, this would be the first known cartographic evidence of Norse presence in North America, predating Columbus by over half a century. The map's own provenance reads like a mystery novel, surfacing in Europe in the 1950s before its sensational acquisition by Yale. The parchment itself is genuinely old, likely from the 1400s, but the ink that traces its lines tells a conflicting story. Advanced chemical analysis revealed the presence of anatase, a form of titanium dioxide that was not available in pure, synthetic form until the 1920s. This finding became the cornerstone of the forgery argument, suggesting a modern hand had drawn upon ancient vellum. Proponents of the map's authenticity counter with equally complex points. They argue the anatase could have come from a medieval ink batch contaminated with a rare mineral. They point to the map's stylistic consistency with other portolan charts of the era and the plausibility that knowledge of Vinland, mentioned in the Norse sagas, could have persisted in European monastic circles and been copied by a scribe. The debate is a perfect collision of science and history, of carbon dating versus chemical forensics. It asks us to weigh the hard evidence of a laboratory against the shadowy corridors of historical possibility. To declare it a forgery is to accuse an unknown 20th century individual of a breathtakingly scholarly hoax, one that required deep knowledge of medieval cartography, Latin paleography, and Norse history. To accept it as genuine is to hold a document that literally redraws our understanding of the age of discovery. The Vinland map, therefore, presents a different kind of decipherment challenge. We are not trying to translate a lost language, but to authenticate a single, profound claim written in the familiar tongue of Latin. Its mystery is not one of meaning, but of truth. It is a historical ghost haunting the border between a monumental discovery and a masterful fraud. This struggle to separate truth from a brilliantly crafted illusion stands in stark contrast to a text whose physical reality is unquestioned, but whose very nature is a profound cosmic riddle. While the Vinland map tests our ability to discern historical truth, another text challenges the very foundation of why we seek to understand at all. The Codex Seraphinianus is a modern masterpiece of deliberate bewilderment. Created by the Italian artist, architect, and designer Luigi Serafini over a 2-year period in the late 1970s, this massive volume presents itself as an encyclopedia of a world that does not exist. Its pages overflow with breathtaking, watercolor illustrations of surreal flora and fauna, impossible machines, and bizarre social rituals. Fish carry candelabras on their backs, fruits bleed, and couples slowly merge into single, alligator-like creatures. Every image is accompanied by captions and paragraphs written in an elegant, cursive script that looks perfectly logical, with consistent letter forms, punctuation, and paragraph structure. It feels like a real language, yet it is a complete fabrication, a beautiful nonsense alphabet invented by Serafini to mimic the act of writing without conveying any fixed meaning. This is not a cipher waiting for a key. The artist himself has stated that the writing has no intentional code to crack. It is meant to be experienced, not solved. The Codex recreates the sensation of being a child who picks up a sophisticated adult book. You see the authority of the text, the seriousness of the diagrams, the flow of information, but the specific meaning remains just out of reach, inviting your imagination to fill the void. In this way, Serafini crafted a profound philosophical work about knowledge itself. His surreal biology and physics question our categories of the natural world. His invented sociology holds a mirror to the absurdities of our own customs. The work asks a daring question of every researcher staring at the Voynich manuscript or the Phaistos disc. What if the meaning we are desperately seeking is not a single, factual message, but an open-ended invitation to wonder? Some analysts, unable to accept this artistic premise, have spent years attempting to find statistical patterns or hidden codes in the script, a testament to our deeply ingrained compulsion to decode. The Codex Seraphinianus stands apart from the historical mysteries not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a commentary on all puzzles. It suggests that the silence of an undeciphered text can be a space for creativity, not just frustration. It honors the aesthetic and emotional power of the unknown, reminding us that some mysteries are not locks to be picked, but gardens to be wandered. This artistic embrace of the incomprehensible shifts our perspective as we return to the ancient world, to a text whose potential meaning is not sociological but celestial, written not in an imaginary script, but in one of humanity's oldest and most enduring forms of notation. The artistic mystery of the Codex Seraphinianus asks us to embrace the unknown, but the silence of the Indus Valley script is a historical void we are compelled to fill. Flourishing along the banks of the Indus River over 4,000 years ago, this civilization built meticulously planned cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, complete with advanced drainage systems and standardized weights. They were contemporaries and equals of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Yet while we can admire their bricks and beads, we cannot hear their words. Their script, found etched onto small stone seals, pottery fragments, and amulets, is the central barrier to understanding them. These inscriptions are tantalizingly brief, often just 4 or 5 symbols in length, and they are almost always paired with a beautifully carved image of an animal, a majestic bull, an elephant, or the enigmatic unicorn-like creature that appears on countless seals. The script itself is elegant and complex, with around 400 distinct signs, suggesting a fully developed writing system. But this very complexity, combined with the extreme shortness of the texts, creates a perfect storm of frustration for linguists. It is like trying to reconstruct an entire novel from a handful of random book titles, without a long, continuous passage or the Holy Grail, a bilingual inscription linking these symbols to a known language. Every decipherment attempt hits a wall. The core debate is fundamental. Are we looking at a true language encoding the speech of the Indus people, or is it a proto-writing system, a set of logosyllabic symbols that might represent concepts, names, or clan identities without forming full sentences? Some scholars even propose the signs are non-linguistic, acting as political or religious emblems or markers for merchants. The animal imagery adds another layer. Is the unicorn a symbol of a ruling family, a totem of a guild, or a depiction of a mythological being central to their beliefs? We simply do not know. Unlocking this script would do more than satisfy academic curiosity. It would throw open the doors to a lost world. We could finally learn the names of their kings or priests, understand their system of governance, read their myths, and comprehend the spiritual ideas behind their artifacts. The silence of the Indus script is the silence of an entire civilization's inner life. We see their astonishing achievements in clay and stone, but the thoughts that guided those hands remain locked in symbols we can see but cannot read. This profound silence from one of humanity's first urban experiments makes the next text all the more startling, for it is a script that the world believes it can read, but whose true message may be one of warning and dread. The promise of a fortune just out of reach is a uniquely potent kind of silence. In the rolling hills of Bedford County, Virginia, that silence is encoded in 3 sets of numbers known as the Beale ciphers. The story, as told in an 1885 pamphlet, is pure American romance. A mysterious adventurer named Thomas J. Beale allegedly buried a colossal treasure there in the 1820s, leaving a locked iron box with a local innkeeper for safekeeping. Inside were 3 sheets of numbers. Beale vanished, never to return. Years later, the innkeeper opened the box and after 20 years of effort, managed to crack only the second of the 3 ciphers. That decoded message was a stunning inventory. It listed over 2,900 pounds of silver and more than 5,000 pounds of gold, along with jewels, all deposited by Beale and his 30 unnamed companions. The numbers were a simple book code. Each number corresponded to the first letter of a specific word in a particular document. For the second cipher, that key text was the Declaration of Independence. Number 1 stood for the first letter of the first word, A, number 2 for the first letter of the second word, B, and so on. With that key, the list of treasure tumbled out. But this single solution only deepened the mystery. The first cipher is said to describe the treasure's exact location in the county. The third cipher holds the names and residences of the treasure's owners and their next of kin. Both remain stubbornly unbroken despite using the same basic method as the solved second cipher. This is the maddening core of the puzzle. If you know the method, why can't you solve the others? The logical conclusion is that the key text is different for each cipher, and without knowing which book, pamphlet, or document Beale used, the numbers are just noise. For over a century, hopeful hunters have tried everything from the Bible to Shakespeare's plays, to no avail. This leads to the haunting question that overshadows the entire endeavor. Is the Beale story a genuine historical cryptogram or an elaborate, brilliant hoax? The tale has all the hallmarks of a fabricated treasure legend designed to sell pamphlets. No independent evidence of Thomas J. Beale or his mining expedition has ever been found. The solved cipher, some argue, could have been created first, with the two unsolvable ciphers added to create an aura of impenetrable mystery. Yet, the very possibility that it could be real, that a fortune in 19th century gold might still be buried beneath a Virginia hillside, has been enough to fuel generations of dreams, expeditions, and endless cryptographic effort. The Beale ciphers represent a modern mystery where the stakes are not just academic but fantastically tangible. They blur the line between a solvable puzzle and a crafted myth, a ciphertext where the greatest secret may not be a location on a map, but the truth of its own origin. This pursuit of material treasure, grounded in earth and code, stands in stark contrast to a text that seeks to map a far more elusive landscape, the journey of the soul after death. Buried within the dry administrative records of a vanished civilization is a secret about the birth of writing itself. The Proto-Elamite script emerges from the dust of ancient Iran, a contemporary and a cousin to the earliest cuneiform of neighboring Sumer. Used for a brief window around 3,100 to 2,900 years before the Common Era, its clay tablets are bureaucratic ghosts. They list commodities, tally livestock, and record distributions, the mundane paperwork of one of humanity's first complex societies, yet we cannot truly read them. The script borrowed the concept of writing from Mesopotamia, but then struck out on its own, developing a system of roughly 1,000 distinct signs that are uniquely Elamite. This independence is both its significance and its curse, because it left no direct descendant, no later script we can read that evolved from it. Scholars are essentially trying to crack a code with only the barest of clues. The tablets themselves offer little help. They are not epic poems or royal decrees that might contain recognizable names or grandiose phrases. They are inventories. Imagine trying to learn English by staring only at spreadsheets of numbers and abbreviated product codes. You might deduce that SLT means salt and BFL means buffalo, but you would never grasp grammar, metaphor, or the soul of the language. This is the core challenge with Proto-Elamite. We can identify numerical signs and guess that a recurring symbol next to a number might represent a jar of oil or a measure of grain. But the underlying language those symbols represent is a complete mystery. Was it an early form of the Elamite language known from later ciphers, or was it a completely different tongue spoken by this formative culture? Each undeciphered sign is a closed door to understanding how this early state organized its labor, managed its surplus, and exerted control over its people. Deciphering it would do more than translate ancient bookkeeping. It would illuminate the quiet, practical engine of a civilization in its infancy, showing us how a society distinct from Sumer chose to record its wealth and power. It would fill a critical gap in the story of the ancient Near East, revealing not just what was traded, but how people thought about value, order, and memory at the very dawn of history. The script was used, evolved for a few centuries, and then simply abandoned, perhaps replaced by a more efficient system lost to time. Its silent tablets are a reminder that writing itself was an experiment, and not every experiment left a manual for us to follow. From these earliest attempts to press meaning into clay, we now turn to a civilization that chose a radically different and profoundly tactile method to record its world. A ledger can be made of thread and memory. High in the Andes, the Inca Empire managed the largest state in the pre-Columbian world without a system of writing as we recognize it. Instead, they used the Khipu, a dazzlingly intricate device of colored cords made from cotton or camelid fiber. A primary cord hangs horizontally, from which dozens, sometimes hundreds, of pendant strings are suspended. Each pendant is a constellation of information, its meaning conveyed through a multitude of variables: the color of the cord, the spin and ply of the thread, the type of knot, and its precise position along the string. To the untrained eye, it resembles an abstract tapestry or a complex piece of fiber art. To a trained Khipu, an Inca record keeper, it was a dynamic and precise document. For many years, scholars confidently understood Khipu as accounting tools, the database of an empire that ran on reciprocity and redistribution. They recorded census data, tribute payments, and storehouse inventories, using a decimal system where the position and style of a knot represented units, tens, hundreds, and thousands. This much we can read, but a growing number of these artifacts defy such simple classification. These narrative Khipus, as they are called, have structures that are non-numerical. Their knot patterns do not align with accounting sums. Their color sequences are more varied and symbolic. Their very construction suggests they were meant to encode something far more complex: histories, genealogies, laws, or even epic poems. The potential here is staggering: a three-dimensional literature woven from string, a complete non-alphabetic language of knots. The tragedy and the core of the mystery is the severing of the living tradition. During the Spanish conquest, the use of Khipus was actively suppressed as part of the campaign to dismantle Inca culture and impose European systems. While some chroniclers noted that Khipus could record narratives and even described using them to recount history in legal settings, the last Khipu who held the full semantic code passed away without transmitting it. The living key was lost. Modern researchers are now attempting to rebuild that key from silence using 21st century tools. They have created vast digital databases of every known Khipu, cataloging millions of data points: color, knot type, chord direction, and position. By searching for statistical patterns and recurring structures across hundreds of artifacts, they are beginning to see the ghost of a grammar emerge. Some hypothesize a binary-like logic within the spin and ply of the chords, a language built on contrasts of direction. Others see in the complex color coding a way to represent different subjects or places. Each new pattern is a tentative step toward hearing the stories these chords may hold. To decipher the narrative Khipu would be to recover the voice of the Inca, not from Spanish chronicles, but from their own chosen medium. It would validate an entire mode of thinking and recording that operated outside of glyphs or alphabets, proving that complex thought can be woven, quite literally, into existence. These knotted strings challenge our very definition of a text, asking us to expand our understanding of how a civilization can speak across time. From this sophisticated, tactile language of chords and knots, we descend to a mystery carved in the most permanent of materials, where the message is not in the complexity of the code, but in the baffling simplicity of its marks. The knotted language of the Khipu challenges our very definition of a text, but the Dispilio tablet asks an even more fundamental question. What if writing itself is far older than we ever dared to believe? In the quiet waters of a prehistoric lake in northern Greece, a discovery emerged that threatens to redraw the timeline of human symbolic thought. Known as the Dispilio tablet, this simple wooden slab was preserved for over 7,000 years in the oxygen-starved mud of a Neolithic lakeside settlement. Carbon dated to around 5,260 years before the Common Era, it is a staggering 2 millennia older than the earliest known clay tablets from Mesopotamia. Its surface is inscribed with a series of linear, angular marks, a sequence of engraved symbols that look purposefully arranged. They are not pictures of animals or people. They are abstract, geometric, and repetitive, bearing the hallmarks of a deliberate system. This is not just a random scratch on a piece of wood. The arrangement suggests intention, a sequence meant to be read or recognized. The implications are seismic. If these marks constitute a form of writing, even a very primitive proto-script, then the story of literacy in Europe does not begin with the Minoans or the Greeks. It begins here with the farmers and fishermen of a lakeside village during the New Stone Age, a time we traditionally associate with polished stone tools and early agriculture, not with symbolic record-keeping. The debate among archaeologists is intense and unresolved. Could these be ownership marks denoting a family's stored goods? Are they a tally of lunar cycles or seasonal events? Or are they ritual symbols, perhaps connected to spiritual beliefs we can no longer comprehend? The tablet's profound isolation is the core of the mystery. No other artifact with comparable markings has been found from the same period in the region. It is a single sentence from a conversation lost in deep time, with no dictionary, no parallel text, and no living linguistic tradition to provide even a whisper of context. We have nothing to compare it to. This isolation makes every interpretation speculative. Proponents of its status as early writing point to the structured, linear quality of the symbols. Skeptics argue that without a clear linguistic context or more examples, it remains in the realm of symbolic marking, a precursor to writing but not writing itself. The miracle of its preservation, a gift from the waterlogged soil, only deepens the enigma. It offers a breathtaking possibility, a glimpse of cognitive complexity in prehistoric Europe that our standard historical narratives simply do not account for. The Dispilio tablet is a ghost from a world before history, a silent witness to an intellectual leap we never knew was taken. It suggests that the human drive to fix meaning into a permanent form may have awakened in scattered pockets of innovation long before it coalesced into the systems we recognize today. This solitary wooden plank is a profound reminder that the past is always more inventive, more nuanced, and more mysterious than the clean timelines in our textbooks. From this deep, watery silence of prehistory, we ascend to a later era of geometric precision, where symbols were not carved into wood, but carefully inked onto parchment with a very different kind of intent. 87 elegant squiggles on a small sheet of cream-colored paper hold the weight of a century of curiosity. This is the Dorabella cipher, a personal note written in July 1897 by the celebrated English composer Edward Elgar, addressed to a young friend, Dora Penny. The symbols themselves are beautiful, a flowing script of crescents, loops, and slanted lines arranged in 3 lines of text. They look almost like a private musical notation or a hurried, artistic shorthand. For a man like Elgar, this was not out of character. He was an avid cryptographer and puzzle enthusiast who wove coded messages into his correspondence and even embedded musical ciphers based on friends' initials into his grand orchestral works. The Enigma variations are a testament to his love of hidden meaning. So when he sent this note to Dora, he was engaging in a favorite game. She kept the cipher for decades but could never solve it, and Elgar, perhaps delighting in the enduring mystery, took the secret to his grave. This is where the cipher's charm and its profound resistance meet. It is simply too short. With only 87 characters, it offers cryptographers almost no material for the statistical analysis that cracks longer codes. There are not enough repeating patterns to establish reliable letter frequencies. It could be a simple substitution cipher where each squiggle stands for a letter. Or it could be something far more complex, a musical cipher where the shapes represent notes or rhythms, or a code based on a specific book known only to Elgar and Dora. The most likely theory, given its context as a light-hearted note to a friend, is that the message is charmingly trivial, a private joke, a bit of gossip, or a simple compliment. Yet its very triviality is what makes its indecipherability so profound. This is not a state secret or a treasure map. It is a casual gesture from one person to another, a fleeting thought captured in an invented script. That it has remained unread for over 120 years turns a personal whisper into a public monument. Every attempted solution says more about the solver than the composer. Some see declarations of love, others find fragments of poetry, but none have achieved consensus. The Dorabella cipher is a perfect, elegant lock with a key that has been melted down. It reminds us that the drive to encode is deeply human, a way to create intimacy through exclusion, to share a secret for the sheer joy of having one. In the end, this Victorian enigma may guard nothing more than a remark about the weather, but its enduring silence elevates that remark to the level of art. It proves that a mystery needs no grand stakes to captivate us, only the persistent, charming silence of its creator. From this small, intimate note, we now confront a text of staggering scale, one not written on paper but carved into the skin of the earth itself. A personal cipher's intimate silence gives way to a message written on an epic, geological scale. The Nazca lines of Peru are a global icon of mystery, vast geoglyphs of spiders, hummingbirds, and geometric shapes etched into the desert plateau so large they can only be fully appreciated from the air. But the ground holds another, far more subtle secret. Scattered across the same arid landscape are stones and pottery fragments inscribed with a series of stylized figures and abstract patterns. These are not the monumental lines visible from space. They are small, intricate, and handheld, yet they may hold the linguistic key to the entire spectacle. These Nazca inscriptions feature recurring motifs, condensed versions of the animal glyphs, alongside zigzag lines, stepped patterns, and clusters of dots. They look like a symbolic shorthand, a system of notation. The central, tantalizing question is whether these marks constitute a true form of writing, or a sophisticated proto-script used by this ancient culture. Unlike the giant drawings whose purpose is debated, these inscriptions were meant to be seen up close, perhaps read or interpreted by individuals. They suggest a layer of communication that was personal and portable, existing alongside the colossal public art of the lines. The tragedy is that these inscriptions have never been systematically catalogued or comprehensively studied as a potential language. Many lie in museum storage, unconnected fragments of a potential puzzle. Deciphering them, if they can be deciphered, would be a revolution in understanding. It could finally answer the why behind the Nazca lines. Were the giant glyphs part of an elaborate ritual to summon water in a desert environment, a prayer made visible to the gods in the sky? The inscriptions might label specific geoglyphs as belonging to certain clans or deities. They might encode astronomical alignments or calendar dates for ceremonies. They could even be instructions, a symbolic guide left by the makers for future generations on how to use or interpret the sacred landscape. The inscriptions represent a unique archaeological challenge because the text is not confined to a tablet or a scroll. It is integrated into the very artifacts and stones of the region, a writing system woven into the fabric of the place itself. To read it, one must learn to read the earth, to see the connection between a marked pot shard and a bird drawing half a kilometer long. This potential script turns the entire Nazca Plain into a vast, open-air library, where every line on the ground might be a sentence and every inscribed stone a footnote. The silence of these small marks echoes the silence of the giant ones, a dual mystery where solving the smaller could unlock the meaning of the immense. Our journey through the world's undeciphered texts now brings us to a final, breathtaking volume, a manuscript that stands as a perfect fusion of artistic beauty and impenetrable mystery. A book so massive it is said to have required the skins of 160 donkeys to create can only be the Codex Gigas, the giant book. Created in a Bohemian monastery in the early 13th century, this colossal manuscript is a breathtaking physical feat, weighing nearly 165 pounds and requiring 2 people to lift. Its pages contain a vast library of knowledge considered essential for a medieval monastery, a complete Latin Vulgate Bible, historical chronicles, medical texts, and works on exorcism, all written in a single, remarkably consistent hand. This monumental work of devotion and scholarship is, for the most part, perfectly legible. Yet it earns its place among history's great mysteries not for what we cannot read, but for what we cannot fully understand. Its popular name, the Devil's Bible, comes from a single, unforgettable illustration on page 290. There, occupying an entire folio, sits a haunting figure of the devil. He is depicted in a crouch with clawed hands and feet, a green face and 2 red tongues staring out from the page with an unsettling presence. This image alone would be enough to fuel legend, but the myths surrounding the Codex's creation are even more dramatic. The story claims a monk, condemned to be walled up alive for breaking his vows, promised to create a book containing all human knowledge in a single night to atone for his sin. As midnight approached and the task proved impossible, he prayed not to God but to the fallen angel Lucifer, who finished the manuscript in exchange for the monk's soul. The devil then added his own portrait as a signature. This is, of course, a folktale, but it speaks to the awe the physical book inspired. The true mystery for scholars lies not in the devil's picture, which was not uncommon in medieval moral texts as a depiction of evil to be shunned, but in the subtle oddities woven into the manuscript's fabric. Certain pages have a darkened, almost charred appearance, though no fire damage is present, leading to speculation about the inks or materials used. More intriguing are the cryptic symbols and unusual scripts found in the margins and in specific sections. There are passages written in a mysterious alphabet that resembles a cipher, and strange, ritualistic diagrams that do not align with typical Christian iconography of the period. The most compelling question is why? Why would a single scribe, over perhaps 20 years of dedicated labor, insert these enigmatic elements into an otherwise orthodox compilation? Some researchers suggest they could be notes or experiments in cryptography, a monk's private intellectual game. Others wonder if they point to a more syncretic, perhaps even heretical, undercurrent of belief within the monastery, a hidden layer of meaning woven into a sanctioned text. The Codex Gigas is a powerful reminder that a text can be both an open book and a profound secret. We can read its Latin, we can study its history, but the intention behind its most unusual features remains locked within the mind of the scribe who, day after day, poured his life into its creation. It represents the ultimate coexistence of the known and the unknown, a testament to the human capacity to produce both dazzling clarity and enduring mystery within the same object. Having walked through a gallery of 15 such silent voices, From the stamped clay of the Phaistos disc to the woven knots of the Inca, a final, unifying question emerges. What is it about these undeciphered texts that holds us in such powerful thrall, generation after generation? The barriers these texts present are as consistent as they are daunting. Whether it is a clay disc from Crete or a knotted cord from the Andes, each one confronts us with the same fundamental wall. The first and most critical missing piece is the bilingual key, the Rosetta Stone. That one artifact worked because it presented a known quantity, Greek, alongside the unknown Egyptian scripts, providing a fixed point of reference. For the vast majority of these mysteries, no such parallel text exists. They are solitary statements in a linguistic vacuum. Compounding this is the problem of isolation. Many of these scripts, like Etruscan or Rongorongo, belong to language families with no living descendants or clear relatives. There is no sister language to compare them against, no linguistic ladder to climb back into the past. Even when we have multiple examples, like the brief Indus Valley seals, the corpus is often too small for reliable statistical analysis. You cannot discern the grammar of a language from a handful of words any more than you can understand a novel by reading its chapter titles. Finally, and perhaps most poignantly, we have lost the living cultural context. The scribe who carved the Phaistos disc, the priest who chanted the Rongorongo tablets, the administrator who tied knots in a Khipu, they operated within a complete world of shared meaning. Their symbols pointed to things, ideas, and stories that were common knowledge. That shared world, that vital frame of reference has vanished. We are left with the arrow, but the target it was aimed at is gone. This is why distinguishing a genuine, undeciphered language from an elaborate hoax or a work of pure art, like the Codex Seraphinianus, is so crucial. It focuses the quest. Most of these artifacts, however, bear the unmistakable marks of utility and effort. They were not created to baffle future generations, but to communicate with their own. Their very persistence, their survival against the ravages of time, is a testament to the universal human need to record, to be remembered, and to be understood. This shared struggle highlights a profound truth about history. It is not merely a story written by the victorious, but also a story whispered by the silenced, those whose language we can no longer hear. Each undeciphered text is a reminder of how fragile the chain of knowledge truly is, and how heroic the act of reconstruction must be. We are not just solving puzzles, we are attempting the near impossible, rebuilding a lost worldview from scattered symbols alone. This reflection is not a surrender to the silence, but a deepening of respect for the quest itself. And that quest, armed with humility from the past, now looks to the future, to the dazzling modern tools that may one day turn these whispers into a conversation. The journey through these silent libraries reveals a humbling truth about our past. We often envision history as a grand, linear narrative, a story whose chapters we can read in sequence. But the reality is far more fragmented and mysterious. These 15 texts are not mere footnotes. They are entire libraries sealed shut, archives of human thought, belief, and daily life that operate on a frequency we have not yet learned to tune into. From the botanical riddles of the Voynich manuscript to the knotted narratives of the Khipu, we have traversed a landscape of human expression where the maps have been lost, leaving behind only the tantalizing terrain. Each artifact represents a different kind of silence. Some are the silence of a sacred language, known only to a privileged few and then extinguished. Others are the silence of a practical record, its purpose obvious but its details blurred. And a few, like the Codex Seraphinianus, present a silence that is deliberately artistic, a commentary on the very act of seeking meaning itself. Together, they form a chorus of unanswered questions. What were they trying to tell us? What fears did they soothe? What triumphs did they celebrate? What futures did they hope to secure? These texts are more than historical curiosities. They are open doors to rooms we cannot yet enter, challenging our most basic assumptions about language, civilization, and the fragile thread of knowledge across generations. They prove that our understanding of the human story is provisional, a draft constantly being revised with each new discovery or technological leap. The enduring power of these mysteries is not in their refusal to be solved, but in their perpetual invitation. They invite us to embrace the unknown, to value the profound questions as much as the satisfying answers. They remind us that the pursuit is a collaborative, global effort, a shared human project to reclaim lost chapters of our collective story. Every linguist running a new algorithm, every archaeologist brushing dust from a symbol, every historian comparing a faded illustration to a known myth, they are all part of this great endeavor. Perhaps one day a key will be found, a bilingual inscription will emerge from the Indus Valley soil, a pattern in the Khipu chords will suddenly align with a forgotten chronicle, and a voice from the deep past will finally speak again, adding its verse to the epic poem of humanity. Until that moment, these silent texts stand as monuments to the boundless creativity of the human mind and the enduring hope that no story is ever truly lost, only waiting for the right listener. If you found this journey into the unknown fascinating, consider subscribing for more deep dives into history's greatest puzzles. We would love to hear which of these enigmatic texts you find most compelling, so please share your thoughts in the comments below.